everything you think you know is wrong. Just a story, yeah.
We are in the endless woods.
He's real.
If you ever visit the UK and decide to visit some of the more rural villages and hamlets that occupy the countryside here in England, you may be witness to a variety of some strange kind of festivals, traditions, and kind of like little weird things that you may not really necessarily see in kind of mainstream movies and TV show. There are still a great many pagan traditions that people do still celebrate here in the UK, and one of these is Jack in the Green, essentially a kind of a green man folklore legend about a strange kind of mythical kind of being that lives out in the forest. And this is generally celebrated around May Day, somewhat of a traditional English holiday here in the UK. And this is the backdrop of the movie, essentially serving as the boogeyman in this found footage horror movie directed by Sam Casserly and Ariel Anthony Hales. Now this focuses on a YouTuber called Max, who is somewhat of a psychologist, or at least he purports to be. He's actually has a studied psychology, but not actually ever worked as one professionally. But he has this kind of somewhat popular YouTube channel, we are led to believe, where he tries to help people. So he and his girlfriend Nicole are trying to help this particular woman in this film who is an agoraphobic. Now, if in case you don't know what agoraphobic is, it's basically someone who has a fear of going outside. Now, this woman essentially has been a shut-in for 5 years, and Max and Nicole decide to go and visit her, and to try and help her ultimately to overcome her fear. Now, she seems to be deathly scared of a being, a kind of a force of nature outside Jack in the Green, potentially. And Max and his girlfriend Nicole obviously start off with various interviews, and we kind of learn a little bit more about maybe what's keeping this woman hidden inside. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's first of all discuss what I think works with They Are Outside. So, a low-budget found footage movie. I like the way this movie comes at us with footage from various different angles. This movie actually purports to be a kind of cursed movie, very similar to the movie Aaran that we had a couple of years ago, albeit I think that one did a better job of it, if I'm completely honest. But nonetheless, we have another kind of cursed film that has a few similar tricks as Aaran, kind of a few kind of subliminal images here and there to kind of give it that kind of mysterious feel. We actually kind of have a host at the beginning of it as well, kind of introducing it. And then we have the main sort of bulk of the footage being this guy Max, this character Max, essentially doing this kind of stuff for his vlog for his YouTube channel, and that's the conceit here about why he is filming. And he's a skeptic of anything kind of supernatural, which actually gives him a good excuse to keep filming stuff when stuff starts to happen, because he just thinks it's pranks and stuff. So it's a good idea in regards to how that is kind of explained in the movie. We also have a few scenes here and there with different kind of characters having interviews, which we are led to believe is taken kind of more after the fact and things like this. So I actually quite like the conceit here of the found footage way it was kind of constructed and kind of put together. I think it's an interesting idea rather than just more of a straight kind of found footage film that was literally found. It's something that's been kind of put together and has its own kind of mythos, if you like. And we see a kind of a character who is a friend of this kind of shut-in woman who has, put this stuff together, and she's feeling the kind of the cursed effects from it, so to speak. So that I all quite liked. And I think basing a movie on folklore is interesting, but it's so entrenched in certain cultures. And obviously here in the UK, we have all sorts of like weird and wonderful kind of pagan rituals that kind of local people do just for kind of like posterity a lot of the time. And just because it's kind of like the thing that they've done for years and years. And May Day is probably one of the kind of the more well-known kind of like English holidays, so to speak. And, there's lots of kind of like rituals and stuff around the country and kind of festivals and stuff like that that they do celebrate it, but kind of more away from the kind of the main cities and stuff. So it makes for a kind of an interesting backdrop. I mean, you may have kind of seen like images of kind of the Green Man and stuff before. Jack and the Green, as it's kind of known, specifically in this movie. Or they do call him. They kind of change it a little bit and call him Green Eyes and stuff for the film. I have to say I was impressed with the acting from our three female characters. We have Nicole, who is the kind of the girlfriend of Max, who is a sort of somewhat put upon, third wheel in a lot of ways, or she's just kind of filming and feels kind of dejected, like she doesn't really know Max. And I actually kind of quite liked her character. And then we have the woman who is a Californian woman who has moved to the UK and is really in just fear, living in this kind of this little kind of cottage where she feels trapped and ultimately. And I thought her performance is great, as does Emily Booth as kind of as her sort of like new age friend who kind of comes and sees her. And I actually really like their kind of chemistry and their interactions together. And I thought all three of those actresses did a great job of making kind of believable kind of characters here. I also kind of quite like the fact that it's kind of interspersed with footage from the kind of the festival celebrating May Day and kind of things like that. And the idea here that we have a guy who's trained in psychology, kind of trying to help this woman and kind of refusing to believe it, makes for someone who has a background in something like psychology. You would expect him to be kind of like a skeptic and stuff like that. The movie does have as well a few kind of like eerie imagery, kind of good use of kind of the kind of surrounding woods cinematography, stuff like that. It's actually relatively kind of well shot for a found footage movie, kind of staying away from jerky kind of like thrashing the camera around all the like you see in a lot of these movies. The camera work here is actually quite good, but it's not that's like distracting where you think this isn't going to be really a found footage movie. The conceit being the majority of this footage actually takes place inside this house where the camera is mounted on a tripod a lot of the time, so we get some good static camera shots rather than a kind of like shiggy cam that is associated with a lot of kind of found footage films as well. The interesting kind of like lore about kind of Jack and the Green and how that is kind of like expanded upon with the kind of within this this movie is good, and there are some kind of quite interesting illustrated sequences, I would say, that are kind of used to actually meant to be used for the actual YouTube channel itself, but I think actually do help the movie in giving it some kind of interesting artwork and stuff within the film itself. Okay, what doesn't work for me, I think the character of Max is a little bit too unsympathetic. He is meant to be an unsympathetic character because he's brash, he's self-centered, and really kind of is designed to kind of push buttons. But I think it goes one step too far and making him pretty unlikable. And this is the character really we spend the most amount of time with. Yeah, he seems to be honest with you, borderline abusive to the people around him. We have this woman who's invited them into their house, and he's kind of abusing her, if you want my honest opinion. So it's kind of like, you don't really sympathise for the guy, and he's our main character. So I understand that you want to have a guy who seems selfish and kind of up for his own kind of like means, but I think it went a little bit too far in kind of making him seem essentially like an abuser. I have to say as well, it was, again, his association with psychology and that profession is loose at the best of terms. I mean, I'm obviously not a trained psychologist, but it's hard to believe that someone who has this training doesn't really do anything other than try and go go outside, put one step out, really, put your foot out, and that's kind of the extent of his psychological work here. And it just seems a little bit kind of like, that's probably not what would happen, let's be honest. Even if you weren't actually, working as a legitimate psychologist, but you did have, you'd studied at university and what have you, it seems you'd be a little bit more professional than this, I have to say. And I have to also mention, I think the acting is a little bit overcooked by this guy. This character, of all of them, seems to be hamming it up and overacting to a certain degree. There's also some technical elements here that I thought didn't work particularly well. There's some kind of re-recording of lines in ADR that I think sticks out as kind of like a little bit like it's been re-recorded and ADR'd in. And we have to be honest with you, this is such a low budget film. There's not a lot really happens on screen, and you find the movie kind of meanders in kind of like little kind of like subplots about personal stuff that our kind of characters have going on, and kind of tends to stray away from the main plot of, you know, quite a lot throughout the movie into sort of more personal kind of relationships. And, you know, I understand you want to have character building and stuff, but it just seems it's going to take a detour and really kind of distract him, I think, from the actual plot. And therefore the plot feels a little kind of meandering at times, not particularly focused, and ultimately then becomes a little bit dull on occasion. I like the general conceit here. I think it's an interesting setup, but I think the way it's put together is an interesting kind of variation, so to speak, on the kind of the found footage. Although I have to say, I think the ending leans a little bit too heavily on the Blair Witch comparison here, and I think maybe a little bit unsatisfying for some. It does not kind of nail that kind of like oh crap moment like the original kind of Blair Witch did, and I think comes across as a little bit of a pale imitation. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, to be honest with this movie. I like some of the ideas here, maybe better than the execution. I like the kind of, like I say, the female character look very well done. The male character, not quite as much, and he's the main character, which is the problem here. So overall, I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. It wasn't bad. If you like kind of folk horror, slow burn, I'd even say more psychological horrors to a point, but yeah, it's just okay. I don't think it's particularly, you know, all that interesting, but it's certainly maybe worth checking out if you do like those kind of like Wicker Man sort of style movies to a degree. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.